Fall of 1942. Rommel's Africa Corps is just 70 miles from Alexandria. The Suez Canal is hanging by a thread. But at El Alamein, Montgomery draws a line in the sand. And from the west, Patton's torch forces are storming ashore in Morocco and Algeria. The Axis are about to be trapped between two Allied armies. Squeezed from both sides, Axis forces fought a bitter retreating battle all the way back into Tunisia. German High Command poured convoy after convoy across the Mediterranean in a desperate attempt to hold the Tunisian bridgehead and stall the Allied advance. Months of brutal fighting through mountain passes and fortified defense lines followed, until finally, in May 1943, all Axis forces in Africa surrendered. North Africa had fallen into Allied hands. Today we're playing Race to Tunis, a solo roll and write wargame where you command both the 8th Army and the torch forces simultaneously. I'll walk you through a complete turn, from convoy movement and events to attacks, diplomacy and interdiction. Let's begin.
Before we dive into the first turn, let me quickly walk you through the game turn. Each turn is divided into 3 phases. First is the campaign phase, where we mark off the timeline and roll for a campaign event. Next is the Allied phase, the heart of the turn, where we roll our dice and allocate them to attacking locations, conducting diplomacy, intercepting convoys, or gaining supplies. Finally is the convoy phase, where all Axis convoys on the map move 1 space closer to Tunisia, and we check for any Axis surrender bonuses. We start the campaign phase by preparing our dice pool for the turn. At the beginning of the game, we have a total of 7 dice, 3 red, 2 green and 2 white. Red dice belong to the 8th Army, Montgomery's forces advancing from Egypt. They can only be used to attack locations on the 8th Army path. Green dice belong to the torch forces, Patton's armies advancing from Morocco. They can only attack locations on the torch path. White dice are wild cards. They are not tied to any army and can be assigned to either path, or used for other actions like diplomacy, supplies, or convoy attacks. However, white dice are always halved after rolling, rounding up. Separating the dice this way forces you to carefully balance your offensive pressure on both fronts. You can't just pile all your best rolls into one army. You have to manage both advances simultaneously. Next, we mark off a box on the timeline. We start with the leftmost box, which is late October 1942, and each turn we move 1 box to the right. There are 11 boxes in total, 1 for each turn of the campaign. When we finally mark off the last box on the far right, late May 1943, the game ends at the conclusion of that turn, so the timeline is our countdown clock. The final step in the campaign phase is to roll a single die on the campaign event chart. Let's see what the opening turn throws at us. We get a 4. That's Ultra Intercept. Our code breakers have cracked German communications. Good intel is on the way. But before resolving the event text, we must first handle the icons next to the event. This event shows 1 convoy icon. That means we immediately add 1 black Axis convoy cube to Space 1 on the Axis convoy tracker. Space 1 already has a cube, so we just stack it on top. These convoys will move 1 space closer to Tunisia each turn. If they eventually reach the Axis reserves, they'll make enemy resistance much tougher to crack. Now back to the event itself. Ultra Intercept gives us a temporary advantage. We add 1 extra white die to our dice pool, but only for this turn. So we grab a white die and set it aside for the Allied phase. A nice boost from Allied intelligence. Now for the Allied phase. We have 8 dice in our turn 1 pool, thanks to that bonus white die from Ultra Intercept. Let's roll them all and see what we're working with. Here's what we got. Green dice, torch forces. A 4 and a 3 red dice, 8th Army. 3, 3 and 2 white dice, wild, 5, 2, and 2. An interesting opening roll. First, we need to reduce all the white dice in half, rounding up, so the 5 becomes a 3 and both 2s become 1s, which are useless in this game. No 6s, so no air power cubes this turn. And the numbers are mostly average. Not great, but we should be able to manage. We'll need to be smart about where we assign each die. Now we place our rolled dice into their respective dice pools. The green dice go into the slots with green icons in the Torch Forces pool. That's Patton's Western Army. The red dice go into the slots with red icons in the 8th Army pool, Montgomery's Eastern Force. The white dice are wild. They can be placed into either pool, giving us the flexibility to reinforce whichever front needs an extra push this turn. This setup matters because later, when we allocate dice to attacks, each die can only be used from its assigned pool. So think carefully about where you put those white dice. Historically, the Americans courted the Vichy French in Morocco and Algeria to switch sides. We'll do the same. We allocate our green 4 to the Vichy diplomacy tracker. The first box requires a 2. Our 4 doubles it, triggering a diplomatic breakthrough. That lets us mark off the first box and the next one, regardless of its value. We mark off 2 boxes. The second box has an iron cross icon, so we gain 1 CP on the tracker. We're now very close to finishing this row and securing a diplomatic coup bonus. We discard that green die and allocate a white 3 to Vichy diplomacy. Quick note, only green or white dice can be used here. The French were deeply anti-British after the incident at Mers el-Kébir, where the British wanted to intern the French fleet, so no red dice allowed. The white 3 matches the third box, completing the row. That triggers a diplomatic coup. Our bonus, +1 to 1 green, die each turn for the rest of the game. The French are starting to warm up to the Americans. We will use that bonus from diplomacy immediately, and we get to add +1 to our last remaining green die, which changes from a 3 to a 4. We now decide to launch Operation Torch, and because the torch path begins in Casablanca, that is the only location we can attack on the torch path until we capture it by marking off all the boxes attached to it and unlock the next location, which is Oran. We allocate the green 4 to Casablanca, and the first box has a value of 3 inside, and our 4 more than matches it, and so we can mark off the box. One step closer to capturing the location. Now the 8th Army. Our red dice are weak, 3, 3, and 2. Their only unlocked location is Alamein, a tough nut with a first box value of 6. We can't match it this turn, so no progress there. Instead, we allocate the red 2 to supplies. Halve it, round up, that gives us 1 yellow supply cube on the tracker. Supplies are shared between both armies. That leaves 2 red 3s. We send them to attack Axis convoys in the Mediterranean. Convoy Space 1 requires a 3+ to destroy a cube. Both dice succeed. We sink both black cubes and remove them from Space 1. With all dice used up and allocated, we now move to the final phase of the turn, the convoy phase. The first step in the convoy phase is to move any black convoy cubes currently on the map 1 space down the convoy tracker. Right now, there is only 1 black convoy cube left on the tracker, and it's sitting in space 2. That cube now moves down to space 3, the final space before Tunisia. Space 3 is special. Because it's within air cover range of Tunisia, it requires a die roll of 5 or higher to sink. That's tougher than spaces 1 and 2, which need only 3+ or 4+. If this cube is not sunk by next turn, it will land in Tunisia and be added to the Axis Reserves tracker at the bottom of the game sheet. That tracker represents the buildup of extra enemy men and material, fuel, ammunition, reinforcements. Why does that matter? Several reasons. Some events will trigger counterattacks by spending black cubes from the Axis reserves. Those counterattacks remove your dice from play for a turn. If the Axis reserves tracker ever becomes full, 5 cubes, you lose access to your white dice for that turn. A serious penalty. On the other hand, if the tracker is empty at the end of a turn, you gain 1 capitulation point, CP. That reflects low enemy morale caused by a lack of supplies getting through. So keeping those convoys from reaching Tunisia is a good strategy. With the one-turn playthrough complete, I thought it might be useful to explain 2 more important rules of the game that haven't been touched on. Air power, blue cubes. How air power works. Whenever you roll a natural 6 on a green or red die during the Allied phase, you gain 1 blue cube on the air power tracker. White dice do not generate air power. These blue cubes represent tactical air support, fighter bombers, reconnaissance, and ground attack aircraft. You can spend a blue cube at any time to re-roll a single die, green, red, or white. This includes re-rolling dice for attacks, diplomacy, supplies, or even event chart rolls. If a re-rolled die comes up as a natural 6, it also generates another blue cube, so a lucky re-roll can chain into more air power. Or alternatively, you can spend a blue cube to add +1 to any one die. Key tip: air power is your only way to fix bad dice rolls. Use it wisely. Interdiction tracker. Bombing raids. How interdiction works. The interdiction tracker represents your growing ability to sink Axis convoys from the air, using ports and airfields you capture along the North African coast to launch raids. Once per turn, during the Allied phase, you may launch an interdiction mission. To do so, allocate any red or green die, showing 4 or higher to the interdiction tracker. Then, look at the interdiction tracker boxes. For each fully marked off pair of boxes, usually 1 port icon and 1 bomber icon, you roll 1 die for the mission. Each die you roll can be allocated to any convoy space, 1, 2, or 3. To sink a cube, your die must meet or exceed that space's requirement. Space 1 needs 3+. Space 2 needs 4+. Space 3 needs 5+. You can focus all your interdiction dice on one space or spread them out. If a space has 2 cubes, you need 2 successful dice to clear it completely. Key tip: the more ports and air bases you capture, the more dice you roll for interdiction, which means more sunk convoys and fewer Axis reserves. And that wraps up our first turn of Race to Tunis. We made solid progress on the Vichy diplomacy track, sank a couple of convoys, and even picked up a few capitulation points. But El Alamein is still holding strong, and that convoy in Space 3 is dangerously close to reinforcing the Axis reserves. Good luck with your campaign, Commander. Montgomery and Patton are counting on you.